Miami Hurricanes did just land a new verbal commit a couple of days ago, but who's going to be next?
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I'm Alex Donno, University of Miami alumnus, longtime South Florida sports radio vet, and writer for allhurricanes.com. And thank you so much to the everydayers for making Locked On Canes your first and second listen today. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So the Hurricanes Sunday night did land Timothy Merritt, defensive back, who became Miami's seventh verbal commit in the class of 2025. He's had a big round of official visitors the last couple of weekends, have another important official visit week in progress already in Coral Gables. So I wonder who the next man in is going to be. And to help me break that down, we got our dude. I love the fact that he's repping Canes Connection, by the way. Brad Tejeda, who does an incredible job, CanesInsight.com. Brad, how are you?
Couldn't be anywhere else, man. This is the best place, other than Canes Insight, that you can get all your Canes news, man. So anytime we can talk some Canes football, especially recruiting this time of year, it's June. So we're gearing up. So next couple months should be pretty big. But, I'm always loving to be here, man. Thank you as always.
Yeah, and, I'm always in the month of June, it's always we're kind of on the edges of our seats because, there's visits happening every weekend. There's even a midweek visit going on right now with a couple of top receivers, Jaime Ffrench and Vernell Brown. But, for a lot of the blue chip guys, they like to get through all their visits before they make announcements. Some guys announce in the summer. A lot of them are going to wait until even National Signing Day in December. But everybody is itching to know who the next verbal commit is going to be after Timothy Merritt. Miami has received a crystal ball as of, I think, Monday, Brad, from 24/7. Crystal ball for Walter Mathis, three-star defensive lineman out of Calvary Day School in Savannah, to pick Miami. I don't know if there's like a potential announcement imminent from him or anything like that, but that's definitely one to watch. Keeping Mathis in mind, is there anyone else you think could be a candidate to be the next one to pop?
Out of the last weekend of visitors that just happened, you mentioned Walter Mathis out of Savannah, Georgia. It seems like there were some good signs, good communication from both, Miami and Mathis' side. And I believe everything went well to where it's very pro Mathis. And if you look at his offer sheet, his official visits, took an official visit to Clemson and now Miami, and he's still got LSU and Auburn coming up. So just from a offer standpoint, who's actually paying for him to official visit, that's a good sign for a guy like Walter Mathis, who's a little underrated when you look at the 24/7 profile. But when you turn on the tape, the young man's explosive, knows how to use his lower body very well. So that's definitely a name to watch. Another guy's going to be Jaden Wilkerson out of Orlando. He took a visit to Miami over the past weekend. He's 6'6", 330 pounds. We talk a little bit about the offensive lineman specifically at tackle. You had one commitment in the class at one point who decommitted in Lamar Williams out of Havana, who was 6'6", 270, right? So looking after another guy with the same height, but with a lot more weight on him, a lot more productivity, in my opinion, that's where you're looking at. This is a guy that's transferring to Edgewater this upcoming season, so he's going to be playing against better competition. So it'll help the staff kind of evaluate where Wilkerson is really at as far as an offensive lineman standpoint. And you have some other offensive line targets that actually ended up committing elsewhere or are no longer visiting the program, like Dimitri Manning and Jalen Matthews, who just committed to Rutgers in the last 24 hours. One other name I could probably honestly say this past weekend that is very pro Miami is Gavin Nix out of IMG, the linebacker.
Yeah.
Him and his father absolutely love the visit. There's quotes all around social media from Gavin Nix and others that have pretty much said, Miami had blew this out of the park and probably the best visit he's ever had. And this is a guy from a measurable standpoint, can, play at the college level right away. May need, a year to kind of get in the college program, just adjust to the speed. But that's another young man from this past weekend that I would expect to be pro Miami. And then this upcoming weekend, if you want to talk about some names, one name to mention is going to be Chris Ewald, who's visiting this upcoming weekend. Like I mentioned, it's between Georgia and Miami, and he has a commitment date of June 27th, which is, in the next couple weeks. And it's been very pro Miami from the beginning. And this is a guy from Chaminade Madonna in our backyard who will be visiting this weekend, who I expect to have a lot of buzz and generate, possible future crystal balls for Chris Ewald to Miami.
Yeah, a couple of interesting things on Ewald. I had a long conversation about him with Brian Smith earlier this week, and Brian's pretty tight with Ewald, and like he mentioned that Chris doesn't really like to travel. It's why he's not taking a lot of OVs. He's focusing on places that are relatively close to home, and obviously Savannah, or not Savannah, Athens, Georgia is not that far from South Florida, but Miami is a lot closer. So you keep that in mind, and then also, Brad, how important do you think the connections are? He's a Chaminade Madonna player, and he's got, a couple of his top teammates from last year in Zaquan Patterson and Josiah Trader who are at Miami. So I'm sure in this case, Miami's best recruiters might be his former high school teammates who can convince him to stay home.
Absolutely. And then, it doesn't help that, some of the family members are very pro Miami as well, too. So you always like to have the Miami fans in your corner. And this is a guy that Miami has continued to recruit from beginning to end. And that's what you like to see, right? You don't want to put your gas off the pedal when it comes to recruits, especially in your own backyard. And they've been doing a pretty good job at that, as well as, juggling other guys from out of state. We kind of mentioned Timothy Merritt at the beginning of the show from Birmingham, Alabama. And as we know, the last cornerback from Birmingham, Alabama at the University of Miami was Michael Jackson. We saw how that turned out, right? And then you talk about other guys on the current team from the state of Alabama. You got offensive lineman Inez Cooper, who's one of the top offensive linemen, not only on this football team, but probably in the country coming up to this year. And then we all talk about, the last couple months, me, you, and others, Cole McConaughey and Cameron Bobby Pruitt, also from the state of Alabama. So it seems like we're really hitting some home runs here lately, at least we expect to. And you got other guys like Zion Grady, Eric Winters, and Andrew Purcell, who are all also in the state of Alabama we're trying to recruit.
Now, the highest profile visitor this weekend is going to be DJ Pickett, the 5-star defensive back out of Zephyr Hills High School in the Tampa area. He's got family connections to Miami. His cousin Booker Pickett Jr. is enrolled now playing defensive end. His uncle Booker Pickett Sr. played at Miami in the 90s. DJ is a very sought after player. I based on what I've been told in recent months, it seems like LSU is probably the toughest competition Miami's going to have there. Do you agree with that? And do you think Miami could have a chance to get this one over the finish line before signing day?
I think not only LSU is doing a really good job, I think Oregon, has kind of prioritized everything pretty well. Having that last official visit for DJ Pickett will be very interesting, especially with some of the guys that they have committed in the class currently. You still got Dallas Wilson committed in the class that Miami's going after. They just landed Zaire Addison, who was at one point offensive tackle target for the University of Miami. So they're trying to get other guys that have already bought in to their program to now get a guy like DJ Pickett. But the thing is, with the University of Miami, like you said, not only the family ties that DJ Pickett has with the University of Miami, but this is a guy that, again, the University of Miami has prioritized not only for beginning to end, Alex, but this has been the top target, and everyone knows it, right? You go back to 2 cycles ago, I think of a young man like Ruben Bain right out of Miami Central. You think of last year, same thing, Josiah Trader. These were 2 guys that Miami pinpointed from beginning to the end of the recruiting process, that they made sure that they were number 1 priority, and they ended up being Miami Hurricanes at the end of the day. And I expect DJ Pickett to have the same similar situation. And, if all goes well this weekend, after his visit to Oregon as well, I expect DJ Pickett to be a Hurricane, which is all said and done.
I like it. We'll continue with Brad Tejeda because, as mentioned, Miami has a couple of blue chip wide receivers on campus midweek. Big opportunity. You want to keep it locked right here, my friends. We're only getting started on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. And I'm only getting started with these Stanley Cup finals, these NBA finals, baseball happening left and right. You guys want to get in on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book, because, summer means a lot of things, and it means it's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL. FanDuel's giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. It's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. By the way, for our Florida Panthers, heading into Game 3 on the road in Edmonton, obviously Alexander Barkov's status is in question, but the Panthers, you have an opportunity, guys, because we've been making a lot of money on these Panthers money lines, and that's been when the Panthers are favorites in these games. They're plus 112 on the money line for Game 3. goal-and-a-half underdogs. You have an opportunity there on FanDuel. So get in on that. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Thank you so much for making this episode of Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. We're talking recruiting with Brad Tejeda from CanesInsight.com. Brad, I know that I described it this morning as Miami climbing uphill with Vernell Brown, 4-star receiver from Orlando Jones, and probably as well with Jaime Ffrench, 5-star receiver out of Mandarin in Jacksonville. Where do you think things stand there? And does Miami have a legit opportunity to make a move with these players who are actually on campus now?
With Jaime Ffrench and Vernell Brown, like you mentioned, who are on campus currently, on a midweek visit, these are two guys that have obviously been pinpointed to big time programs that have already been successful on the football field, which is what Miami's hoping for this year. And to be quite honest with you, Alex, I personally don't think we have a chance with either until games start being played, to where these young men could really believe what they're being told and hoping to do at the next level at the University of Miami. They have to see it for themselves, right? Kind of similar to how some of the defensive linemen that we targeted last cycle had to see a young man like Ruben Bain, be a true freshman and make the impact that he did. That's kind of what helped you get some of the defensive linemen that you had on this current recruiting class that are now Miami Hurricanes. So I expect some of these big time targets that we're going after at the wide receiver room is going to be kind of similar, right? You got Jaime Ffrench, who is very heavily involved with Texas and LSU, both programs that have been successful on the football field, especially recently, have very good NIL programs just like us. You got Vernell Brown Jr., both the two, were the first two high school athletes that I know of that struck a NIL deal with, I believe it was either Adidas or American Eagle, if I'm not mistaken. So those guys already have the pedigree, already have the name to where they could go anywhere in the country, right? And Vernell Brown Jr. is another guy where Ohio State, Florida State are some programs that I would look after for Vernell Brown Jr. If I had to go with the two who I have a better shot of, if it's me, it's probably Jaime Ffrench. What I've noticed with the Jaime Ffrench recruitment is essentially anywhere he goes for official visit, once he leaves, that seems to be the new top contender.
Bingo.
So after this visit, kind of ends today, we'll see if there's some more positive generation buzz pro Miami. But at the end of the day, you got other guys like Tyler Williams, who visited the past weekend, Cortez Mills, who seems like Clemson is the top choice right now for him, Dallas Wilson, who we expect to visit this weekend, was supposed to visit last weekend. So as long as he shows up in Miami this weekend, I think we're going to be very pro Dallas Wilson. And then you can't forget Joshua Moore from West Broward, 6'4", 205 pounds, just visited Miami. Very pro Kevin Beard. So that's a young man that the wide receiver coach really likes. And Dalen Upshaw from Alabama, who visited as well. So you do got some choices. Out of all those, though, I think Dallas Wilson and Josh Moore are probably the top two guys that I feel are most likely to be Hurricanes at this point in that wide receiver room.
I like that. We mentioned Chris Ewald, another defensive back who's visiting, safety from Miami Central, Amari Wallace. Now, I don't. You could tell me what the latest trend there might be with Miami, because I know as of March he did receive some crystal ball predictions to land at Miami. But the thing I noticed in recent years, the crystal balls get less and less accurate. I just the times that we're in now. A player can be trending somewhere in March, and then April they're trending somewhere else, May, June. Where do you think Amari Wallace is right now with Miami?
It's funny that you mentioned Amari Wallace in the early crystal ball predictions, right, heading to Miami, because I could think of another similar recruit that Miami was going after at the same school, just different position, and that's Floyd Boucard, right? Was at one point very heavily Miami, and now we saw within the past week that he has two crystal balls to USC, right? So Amari Wallace and him are guys that play in our backyard in Miami Central. And I think right now, I think the staff is really prioritizing other guys outside the state of Florida in certain positions, safety being one. I know we mentioned Amari Wallace, but you do have other guys like Andrew Purcell, Eric Winters, like I mentioned. You also got Drake Stubbs sitting out there in Central Florida as well, who is currently committed to USC, but I expect Miami to be very heavily involved along with the other two Florida schools in Florida and Florida State. You also got Bryce Fitzgerald, who's visiting at the end of the month, which will be a Florida, Miami, and also USC battle. And you got some other corners that you're going after that are straight athletes that you could kind of move anywhere you want, like a DJ Pickett and others. And you can't forget Jabari Antoine, current LSU commit that visited this past weekend. From everything I heard, that visit went as great as it can. And I think Miami could definitely possibly flip a guy like Jabari Antoine. And like we've seen, not under just Mario Cristobal, but even in the past with Manny Diaz and prior staff, it's been very hard to get consistent, great recruiting classes in that corner secondary room. And I think this is the opportunity, this class, with the amount of targets that you're going after, you have the flexibility to really go all in with a lot of these secondary guys, similar to how you did your first year at offensive line and last year with the defensive line class.
Yeah, a player I want to ask you about, because we haven't talked about him in several days here on Locked On Canes, who's going to be visiting June 21st, is Iose Epenesa out of Illinois, Edwardsville, Illinois. Miami obviously has done a surprisingly good job getting defensive linemen out of that state in recent cycles. You know, he's got an NFL pedigree from his older brother, Epenesa, who's a 5-star. Do you think Miami can get firmly in the mix there later this month?
Listen, I think if there's one recruit, especially outside the state of Florida, that every school in the country needs to watch. I mean, there's not that many schools that are really going all in on Iose, like you said, but Iowa obviously is one who he just went on a visit with the family. You know, that's where a lot of the family ties comes from, but he also had some strong family ties with Coach Joe Salavea, right? And I think, you know, I could remember a guy in Francis Mainoa who has some family ties to Joe Salavea as well, and we ended up getting that one done. And we know how Mario and this staff likes to work, especially in that state of Illinois, right? We're not the only ones that know. I think Illinois' coach kind of chimed in last cycle as well. Right. So I wouldn't be surprised if Mario kind of puts his loafer print right there in the state of Illinois once again. You know, last class, we landed 2 defensive linemen in Justin Scott and Marquise Lightfoot. We have the opportunity of doing that again with Iose and Nathaniel Marshall. But I honestly, to be quite honest, I think you only have a chance at one of them. But I think we could probably land Epenesa when it's all said and done.
You know, we were talking off air before we started about, you know, what's going to be going on late August in Gainesville, because we're trying to get as many Canes fans up there as possible. You're, of course, going to be at the game. I'm going to be going up to the game. Obviously, you know, I'm not going to say we're going to take over the swamp or anything like that. It's obviously going to be a very pro-Florida crowd, but we're trying to get as many Hurricanes fans together that weekend. What do you have planned? Because I'm leaning on you to organize everything. I'll show up, but I need Brad Tejeda to organize everything.
No, for sure, man. We're gonna turn Gainesville to Canesville, right? That's what we're gonna do August 31st. But it's gonna start August 30th, the night before, right? I got 2 events planned for any Hurricane fans that will be in the area. I got one from, I believe, 5 to 7 o'clock at V Pizza. I'll be putting some announcements on that. It's going to have food, alcohol. We're going to have Bo Bradbury do a live painting. We're going to have some cool raffles and some alumni, along with some special guests that will be speaking. And then after that, right across the street, we got the awesome Caneswear event that I'm helping out with. That'll be from 6 to 2 in the morning. So we're going to be partying all night with some former Canes as well, Lamar Thomas and a few others. You're down at Gainesville. We're going to make it happen.
You can count on me at the party. I'll be there till like 9 o'clock, and then I'll be in bed by 10. But you can count from like 6 to 9. You can count on me out there, Brad.
All good. I'm with it.
Always a great conversation with Brad Tejeda. You want to follow him on X at Tejeda Brad. You know, check out his work, and I'm very, very high on what the crew at Canes Insight is doing. You guys do a fantastic job. You know, I don't view anybody else in the space as competition. I think that if we all get along and we all work together, it can make all of our products even better. So I appreciate you, Brad. Enjoy the rest of your night coming up.
Absolutely. You as well, man. And thank you as always for letting me be on this great channel.
We'll talk to you guys next time on another episode of Locked On Canes. We're part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.